Howdy, howdy. Back again with another beautiful episode of Cogdell Law Uncensored. Got producer Tommy in the back today. Next to me, Teaser Pony. How's it going, Teaser Pony?
Going great. Glad to be on.
And of course, the man of the hour, Dan the Man. Let me wait until Tommy gets through.
The man, the myth, the legend in my own mind.
The man, the myth, the legend, Dan Cogdell. Dan, how's it going?
It's going great.
It's going great. Today's going to be a special episode. We had a session with John Zavatanos and his associate Davis with AZA Law Firm here in Houston, and that'll be the second part. We're going to roll this one out as the first part. So, feeling good. It's a beautiful day in Houston. It's a little hot again, but of course, we like to start every episode with going through the analytics. Dan, can you believe it? You're past 200,000 subscribers, real followers on Instagram and TikTok combined, which is a pretty awesome feat. I mean, we're technically 7 months in now. I ask you all the time, I know feelings are consistent week in, week out about it, but how does that feel? Like, what are your thoughts about that? 200K, that's a pretty big milestone.
Yeah, it is. And thank you you and Tommy for the help, because we wouldn't have gotten there without you. But what it really does is it gets a little oxygen in my lungs, and it makes me, that much more enthusiastic. But look, when we first started doing this, Aaron, we were just making shit up as we went along. We were just flying by the seat of our pants, which we still are in large part doing today. But I want to work harder. I want to get better content. I want to get better guests. I don't want this to be a vanity project, about me. I want to inform. I want to educate. I want to have some fun, and I want people to learn about not only my practice but other lawyer practice.
Yeah. And honestly, Dan, it's like I came to you with really no background in social media, but a firm understanding and data and understanding technology, understanding trends. Tommy, had a little bit more experience with social media, but it's not something either of us were doing professionally. But the numbers didn't lie when you came on our podcast, and it spiked. And I figured, why not? And you took a chance on us, so I'll always be grateful for that. And here we are 7 months later, and we're just collecting more data, and we're getting more feedback. And we have a lot of comments of people who are our fans and asking for, hey, can you guys fix this? And can you add this edit? And can you improve here? And can you do this? And can I have the lang format consistently every single day of the week of this, of that? Just a lot of positive feedback to me, because it's like they really want it. They want the content. They want to see it. They listen to you in long format. Not only do you have these views and following in these short clips, you're really, showing you some of the analytics against Mel Robbins' page on TikTok, and it's very similar. So
that blows me away. I did not see that coming.
Obviously, Mel's got the book sales and a big YouTube following, which we don't have.
She's terrific. I love Mel.
I love Mel too. I think she's great. We don't have that yet, but we're on our way. And I ask our audience to be patient. We're working on these things in real time, and we're improving. And we're, again, very gracious about Dan's willingness to invest in this as we continue to grow it. A lot of people will ask me, well, you have like X amount of views and followers. Like, how much money are you guys making? How much it's coming? It's like, it's the Wild Wild West. Like, the page is still so new. We're not jumping on the very first brand deals and the, little things that come our way, the low hanging fruit. We really want to build this and have the right brands to work with us. And, we're open to having the conversations, but we're very patient in seeing this through, because we believe in what you're doing. We talked about this off camera.
What was it? The Thompson Hotel? Was that where we were in Dallas?
It was at the Thompson Hotel, the National. It's a part residential, part hotel, and you were staying at the hotel there. We were at a bar, a rooftop bar called Catbird. Took a cigar out.
I've been there.
Yeah. We were and it was just Dan and I. No one else was out there. It was a beautiful day. I remember being like, this is
sweet.
And
my teeth were falling out. Which was awesome.
Some of Dan's teeth were falling out. He was trying to smoke a cigar, and I was looking at him, and I was like, shit, man, here, let me show you this. Here are the analytics. I really believe that there's something here with you. And it doesn't take a genius to understand that Dan is just charismatic and just a good time. And again, always grateful for the fact that he was like, fuck it, let's do it and let's try. And it showed me a lot about his character at his age, willing to just try new shit.
At my age.
And I say that like guys in their 50s, 40s, 30s, like, old, they say that, old dogs don't learn new tricks. Like, I know a lot of guys who won't go out of their routine at 32, let alone, in your 60s. And the fact that you're just like, fuck it, let's try. It says a lot about you. And early content that we'd put out was, hey, like, what do you say to guys that, want to change their lives and change the path of their life? And you are always open to kind of share, and it's just honest. Like, you're not trying to, there's no playbook that we're following. There's no one that we're piggybacking, but there's a whole bunch of people that are copying us. I mean, there's a few that I can point at that literally put out flyers for podcast consultants like a month after we put our, pod out. So super grateful for the audience. Keep giving us your feedback. We got a lot of haters too. Obviously, like I've told Dan when we
Love
post
my haters. Love my haters.
When we post the political shit, just naturally, it's such a toxic and it's such peanut brain comments. It's like, oh my God, it's exhausting. But that's just the audience. I mean, more recently, we put out the Kash Patel post that has over almost 1 million on Instagram and like 500K plus on TikTok. And everyone's telling us about the real truth about what's going on. And Pam Bondi, the post we put out about the Attorney General and, some of her background and some of her, leanings and prior work lobbying for Qatar and what have you. And people are always trying to, do these whataboutisms, Dan. And they're like, well, you're saying this, but what about what, Biden did or what Kamala did? And it's like, okay, so I want to give you a chance to respond to those comments, Dan.
Yeah, a couple things. And people always attack me when I post something about Biden, or I'm sorry, about Trump, or about Bondi, or about Kash Patel, whatever, as a liberal. One person called me a Jew, which was first time I've been called a Jew. But, they get really animated. And first off, the thing about Kash Patel, where I posted that before he was head of the FBI, he had the Kash Foundation, which raised money for January 6th defendants, which is an absolute literal fact. That happened. And all these, that didn't happen. That's bullshit. It would come up at the congressional. It did. But anyway, but as apropos to what you're saying, Aaron, people always go, well, what about Biden or what about Kamala Harris? And it's like I was saying to you earlier, Jeffrey Dahmer didn't get to invoke the what about Ted Bundy defense, right? I mean, you got to own your own shit. It's just because somebody else did something equal or worse doesn't mean that you didn't do something bad. I just that whataboutism. It's just really where our country is at. We don't want to have a discourse. We don't want to have a conversation. We want to attack the other person and call them a Jew or a libtard or a democratic or whatever these folks are saying. And they want to invoke what somebody in my party, which is really not my party, did. It never ends.
Well, I agree with that, right? It's like if you criticize somebody for doing something, then as of late, it's automatically an endorsement for the other party. And I don't think it should be viewed that way. You can have critiques for both sides and still, view what's right and wrong.
Look, I've voted Republican more than half of my life, and I'm not a Trump fan, but I understand why some people like him. I don't understand a lot of things that he does, but I don't naturally dislike someone just because they voted for Trump. It's a free fucking country. They can vote for whomever they want. I'm not going to attack someone just because they voted for Trump. It is what it is.
No, I think it's very interesting. I call them peanut brain comments because it doesn't make any sense. And Dan, you're actually very, very, and this is what really attracted me to you from a content perspective, was that it's really hard to put a finger on the pulse of where you lean, what you believe in, because you look one way, you say one thing, you represent one guy, you represent the other person who's on the other side. We have comments of people calling you, like a white nationalist. This guy's a hardcore Republican. And then
Christian nationalist.
Yeah, white Christian nationalist, hardcore Republican. And then we have
who represents Muslims on occasion.
And then we have people who are like, oh, you don't understand Muslims and Islam, and this guy's a liberal. We get it, you're a liberal, because one post is about one thing. Like teaser pony, like you said, nuance is lost. Like no one wants to peel layers back and understand that things have, more detail than the surface level comment that's like shared. And once you make that comment, it's like automatically you're on this team where you can't just like objectively look at something. And that's what I love about Dan. It's like he's given us a background based in facts and talking about these people's stories before they became part of Trump's team, when they're their personal lawyers, and the things that they did and why it's important not to, bring these things together and have your personal lawyers run part of the administration, and what kind of complications, like these things are just fact based. Like, do you think that, like, I get really curious about this, Teaser Pony. Do you think that older generations struggle because the algorithms, kind of feed them what they want to see, so they're not even able to look past their own algorithm? Do you think young generations struggle with that as well? Like, why do you think things have gone as extreme? I know that the president hasn't helped, but beyond just that, like, what is it about the way we live our lives now that have gotten people not to look past their camps?
I think it's algorithms, but I think it goes further than that. I think, and I know from personal experience through family members, I won't name names, but they're watching what they want to watch, right? So Fox, for example, or whatever sort of right-wing news, my mom watches MSNBC and that's her platform and that's what she's watching, right? So they're picking their side and that's what they're going to watch. And so, like the algorithm, it's just feeding them more of what they want to hear. So I think that's a problem. I do think, and we've talked about this before, that the podcast space is really revolutionizing how younger people view politics and what side they're taking.
Correct. I mean, that's why, like, going to that podcast conference, little the PodCon that Dan got us tickets to, it was interesting. Maybe we didn't learn as much as we thought we would, but we did learn some things about the analytics behind how many people listen and watch podcasts, and how the space isn't as saturated as you may think, and there's still room for opportunities. And I think, again, Dan, like, you want this to be very informational from like a legal perspective, and share kind of the law, the things you've learned about law and the practice of law. But I think you're uniquely positioned to also give perspective about the culture, about politics, about things that are happening in everyday life, because they're very connected to the rule of law. And what do you think about that?
I think that we're all living in an echo chamber to some extent or another, right? And there's so much information out there and available to consume that we can always find validation for our position, no matter how ridiculous it is. For example, after I posted the Kash Patel comment, somebody said that was an inside job. There were 276 FBI agents in D.C. They were the instigators. And so I conducted whatever quick research I can. It's total bullshit. The 276 FBI agents were in town for the inauguration in a few days and prepping for that. There's no credible information that the FBI was behind that. And I thought, what a crazy conclusion. And then again, using artificial intelligence, that's crazy. What percentage of the American public believe? 25% of the American public believes that nonsense. And it's like, do we even have a chance at normalcy anymore? Are we ever going to get back to planet Earth when you believe that shit? And I was criticized heavily for saying that in my view, it was more upsetting to me than 9/11. And I didn't say worse, I said upsetting. And I said upsetting because it was our own. It was Americans that were attacking our democracy, not, a foreign force. And I didn't say it was worse. It's not worse, thousands of people died and you're an idiot. And it's like they don't even read what you post or what you say. They just have their conclusion that's different from yours or vice versa. And I'm an idiot, I'm a Jew, I'm a lib, I'm a white Christian nationalist, or whatever is the opposite of their position. And here we go. But it's fascinating to me. And this is one of the things I want to talk about. Long story is, look, we've it's a lawyer-based, legal-based platform. And I get attacked all the time, which is fine, about being a lawyer, being a criminal defense lawyer, lie, cheat, and steal, whatever. But, one of the things I want to segue into is, the legal profession is facing a credibility crisis like we have never had before, right? When I started, the studies will show that lawyers were at about a 25% approval rate in the early 80s, which is still pretty low, right? But by 91, the studies show it had dropped to below 20%. By the year 2000, it was down to 17%. And today it's 13 to 19%. So in other words, let's go with the 13%. 87% of Americans believe we have little to no credibility. That's awful. I mean, that's just terrible. So I'm kind of digging around to try to find, and again, why do people hate lawyers? So here's what I've come up with.
Yeah.
And then I want y'all's. I think the biggest reason to me is why people hate lawyers is most people only come in contact with lawyers at the worst moments of their lives, right? The adversarial system itself breeds distrust. That's thing number two. Thing number three, it's a binary system, meaning you're going to have a winner and you're going to have a loser. And then thing number four is lawyer advertising. Frankly, if it were up to me, I'd probably put this at higher up. But then we have lawyers and judges behaving badly. So let's kind of rip through all those things. So thing number one, Anthony, talk to us about that.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I was talking to a person that's interested in going to law school yesterday on the phone when I was driving back from a case out of county. And, I said, look, for every sunny day, there's a lot of rain in between. Right. And my part of the explanation as to why I said that is because when people call and when we get clients, which is our form of getting business, they're coming to us really at the worst day of their entire life. And the problem that they have us dealing with is the biggest problem in their entire life. So oftentimes we have to deliver news that's not great. And because of that, I think it's we're their point of contact when it comes to the criminal justice system or really any legal system. And so it's easy for them to sort of build up resentment in conversations and in dealing with their lawyers.
I'm curious, do you feel like, how does that, I want to go back a little bit to what, Dan was mentioning in terms of a credibility crisis that we're going through. Do you think that's an issue across all industries, or is it just something that the legal industry is going through, Dan?
Well, I don't know about other industries because I don't live there, but
Yeah.
I definitely think it's a true crisis in the legal profession. And again, we'll get into the weeds a little bit, but it's a crisis we've brought upon ourselves. Some of it's systemic and unavoidable. Some of it's avoidable. But it's. I've said this 1,000 times when a client who's I've never met before will come in and they're just executing the normal niceties and say it's a pleasure to meet you. And I said, no, it's not. You don't want to be here. It's not nice to meet me. I appreciate the sentiment, but you don't want to be here. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I cannot wait to go see my criminal defense lawyer. That's just not something that happens. But it's the same thing in a divorce, or if they're injured in a car wreck, or there's a will dispute. People don't come and hire a lawyer at a good portion, at a good time in their life. It's just, there's just nothing, and so I think that's a real problem. The second thing is the adversarial system itself breeds distrust. Right? That's thing number two. And look, people realize that lawyers are hired guns. We may not always believe what we're espousing. We can take one side on Monday and another side on Tuesday. One of my favorite examples of this, which is purportedly a true story, he was slightly before my time, Abe Lincoln, but I read his Cliff Notes, and he appeared on a Monday in front of a judge in Missouri arguing on behalf of a railroad who the railroad had hit a landowner's cow, and he was defending the actions of the railroad. And the next day, he showed up in the same courtroom in front of the same judge, and he was representing a different owner of a cow that the railroad had hit, and he wanted to sue the railroad. And the judge pointed out the irony or the inconsistency in that, and Honest Abe purportedly said, "Well, yesterday I was wrong, Your Honor." I mean, so it's just part of what happens. I mean, the adversarial system is breeds distrust. Thing number three is the binary system, and I'll let Anthony speak to that, but that's pretty self-evident.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cases end in a plea bargain, but not all plea bargains. Well, we say a good negotiation, both sides walk away feeling good about themselves, but that doesn't always apply, and definitely not in our line of work. And I'm not in really in other industries in law, but I don't think that applies across the board. So when you don't get your way, whether it's your wife taking all your money in a divorce, or you're a plaintiff in a lawsuit and you don't get as much money from the company as you thought you were going to get, or you're a criminal defendant and you end up having to plead to something that you didn't want to plead to, it can leave you feeling disgruntled. And those people are talking to their family members, and then family members are talking to other friends. And so word travels fast from or through people that have dealt with lawyers before. So, you can walk away from the legal system feeling slighted. And as a lawyer, part of what we have to do is sort of, again, earlier, like I said, deliver bad news. And even if it's, even if it's not the best outcome in our eyes, it might be the right path to avoid worse outcomes.
That makes a lot of sense. There are winners and losers. Dan, let's talk a little bit about the fourth reason, the advertising piece. Now, I like to think the type of content and marketing we do showcases who you really are and builds trust. And I was always turned off by, the commercials, the billboards, the buses. But talk to me a little about advertising.
Yeah, and again, I've been called out for the hypocrisy of criticizing lawyers who advertise while I'm on a podcast. It's cut up into bits on Instagram and TikTok, and there is some hypocrisy there. But as I've said, even this morning or this afternoon, whatever time it is, this is not I'm the greatest lawyer that ever took a shit, hire me. And in fact, I don't think I've ever said, call us if we can help you. I don't view this as advertising in the Texas Hammer sort of way. One could argue it is. I don't agree with that, because my focus is to educate and inform, but whatever. But look, the lawyer advertising these days is just ubiquitous. It is everywhere. You cannot go into a major city, whether it's Houston, L.A., New York, El Paso, whatever, and the major thoroughfares are just clogged with these advertisements. First off, most of them are really, I don't want to say unseemly, but less than elegant. I mean, the one, Eric Dick, I mean, let's go to that slide. Put my name in their mouth, the Dick Law Firm. I mean, and to me, it's like, really? That's why you went to law school? Would your grandmother be proud of that? Would your aunt be proud of that? I mean, what in the world? But apparently it works, so good for him. He will never have his name in my mouth. And outside of this podcast, it'll probably be the only time I speak his name. But it is what it is. And then we've got the Texas Hammer and all of that. But I don't know what the metrics are, Aaron. I don't know. I guess that stuff must pay off because they keep doing it. But John Morgan, for example, and he runs the largest PI firm in the country, Morgan & Morgan. To me, his ads are not offensive. They're appropriate. They don't make wild claims. And so I can deal with that. And again, this isn't, Cogdell cares this or Cogdell says that. Anybody that refers to himself in the third person ought to be hung by their toenails. But my point is, people are free to disagree. It's just surprising to me that someone would make a decision on something so critical in terms like hiring a lawyer. I would not hire my brain surgeon based upon a billboard. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't hire my dentist. I probably wouldn't hire my vet based upon a billboard. But it works, and there's a reason they're doing it. But all of that having been said, people are sick of this shit, whether they admit it or not, and it drives down the value of our brand. I took a shot at a lawyer who I actually like, and I was talking about him dressing up as whatever that creature was in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And it turns out I hurt his feelings, and I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. He's a nice guy. I actually respect him. But it's like, you can't do that and not expect people to walk away, at least some people, with a negative, image of you. I mean, and again, to me, this sort of stuff just doesn't make them look foolish. It makes us all look foolish. But it seems to get worse every year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, Tease Your Pony, what are your thoughts on like billboards and buses as, again, like millennials? Like, I don't know if I've ever saw something on a billboard and acted upon that. And I mean, we drive from Dallas to Houston to film this, and it's either a lawyer billboard or a Buc-ee's billboard, and that's pretty much what it is on the drive here. But you know, the Buc-ee's one, it helps because we're going to Buc-ee's anyways. But do you think there's value in that in 2025? Like, especially for younger clients, are they leveraging those and acting upon it?
I mean, it depends what line of work you're in. I think if you're in the personal injury space, there is value in that. Volume creates business, but then again, what kind of business are you after? So I don't think, for example, like myself, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm the smartest guy I know, but I mean, I was intelligent enough to pass the bar, right, and become a lawyer. And I don't think
So were those guys,
yeah, right? Yeah, but they're making money. So, I think that certain people, you're drawing certain type of clientele when you market through billboards, right? And I don't think, again, for some of the cases that like Dan has handled or Dan and I have handled together, you know, I don't think that billboards probably would have been the marketing piece that would have gotten those clients to walk through our door. But from a millennial standpoint, what I think is funny about kind of how people our age were raised in the bridge into the digital world where, I mean, we started with MySpace, then it was Facebook, then it was Instagram, right? Everyone preached to me, don't post content, right? Be super careful about what you put out online because it's like a tattoo. You're not getting rid of it. And now that's completely changed. I think that we're just inundated with more and more and more content. And the line that was drawn in the sand is so much further from where it started 10, 15 years ago.
No, that's completely true. I you know, like to tell Dan all the time, the average American screen time is 7 hours. So even when they're
That
driving,
just blows me
I
away.
hate those notifications when it reminds you how long you've been on your phone for the week. And it's
shocking. And you know, when I reach and our business is now on, you know, on the phone, and so I spend a lot of time either posting, editing, looking at other content so that we can, you know, continue to grow this. And so my screen time has gone up, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I've spent that much time. And then you do the research, and you know, my pitch, you know, even to Dan was like, listen, even when they're passing by these billboards, they're looking at their phone. Like they're not even looking up. So, you know, I get really curious about it, and, you know, it's very interesting, but it's one of those things, you know, the world is changing in real time. And in terms of content, what I love about what we do is like, yeah, the eyes are really on the short format, but our long format does exist for people to go watch. And if they need more context, they can go, and the people who actually do care do follow up and do watch it in full length to understand what's going on beyond just the clips.
Yeah. And to that point too, not everyone, a good chunk of people don't ever come in contact with a lawyer for, at least they don't need a lawyer. They don't have to hire a lawyer. Right. And so their knowledge of what a lawyer is are through billboards and large scale advertising. But for practitioners like Dan and I, we kind of know the ins and outs. So we know there's a difference between an ambulance chaser, a divorce attorney, a criminal defense attorney, and a commercial litigation attorney.
Skid marks in front of all of those except the criminal defense lawyer. Is that what we're saying?
Exactly. And so I think the general public is typically exposed to large-scale billboards. And additionally, I think bad press travels faster than good press. So when a lawyer does something stupid, that tends to go through the grapevine a lot quicker than.
And apropos to that segue, bad news travels fast. The fifth and final reason I think why people dislike lawyers so much is lawyers and judges behaving badly, and there is no shortage of that. I want to skim through just a few.
Yeah, talk to us.
I mean, we had Rod Blog. I can't ever pronounce that dude's name.
Blagojevic.
Yeah, that dude who tried to sell Obama's Senate seat was convicted of that. Of course, he's pardoned now, but he was convicted of that. We had Mike Nifong, who was a Duke lacrosse DA who withheld DNA evidence. The Ted Stevens prosecutions, where they hid exculpatory evidence, and he was a senator. The conviction was ultimately overturned, but he lost his Senate seat. Michael Avenatti, who could forget that guy, despite how much we might want to, who was, it's next slide, Aaron, who was Stormy Daniels' lawyer. I mean, that guy was everywhere.
Everywhere. I remember Michael Avenatti. He was all over CNN, all over Fox, all over the news.
He was like the Texas Hammer times 100 that you couldn't turn on a TV with seeing him. And you know, the thing about Avenatti, I'd never heard of him before he represented Stormy Daniels, but he was telegenic. He made a good appearance. He was a convincing guy. And then, you know, the Lord knows he turns around and now he's convicted of extortion, fraud, and in prison. It's just like, how do you go from that much recognition and attention to prison? And I guess that's a subject for another day. Tom Girardi, he was literally the inspiration for the Aaron Brockovich movie. He was what was his wife, Erica Jane or whatever, on some LA housewife thing, who's 30, 40 years younger than. It's just never a good idea, Tom. But this poor motherfucker steals millions after really being on the top of the mountain when it comes to Aaron Brockovich. I mean, it's pretty thin air when there's a movie made about you, and I say that I say that in all sincerity, not trying to make any self-reference, but I mean, that was a wonderful big-time movie made about him. And then he steals millions of dollars from his clients who were plane crash victims and burn victims, and he's 84 years old or whatever it is, on his way to prison. The next one was Ken Anderson. This motherfucker here, he what a horrible human being. He was the DA in a case in Williamson County outside of Austin. He withheld evidence in Michael Morton's murder trial. Michael Morton, and we'll get to him in a second, served 25 years for a murder he didn't commit. And because Anderson withheld favorable information from Michael Morton's lawyers, he was ultimately disbarred and spent a few days in jail. I mean, to me, that's unforgivable. The best thing to come out of that tragedy is even the Texas legislature finally realized that the discovery process in criminal cases in Texas needed a vast reformation, and that tragedy ultimately certainly became the genesis for a much fairer discovery law. And that's Michael Morton there. He did 25 years in prison. He was released from prison on 2011, and then 2 years later, Mark Norwood was convicted of his wife's murder in 2013. But if Ken Anderson would have released that information timely, Michael Morton would have never gone to jail, and Mark Norwood would have been convicted early on. So
that's another kicker in the case too, is that he was wrongfully convicted for the murder of his wife. I mean, imagine completely skipping the grieving process, and then you have to go into defendant mode.
It's unbelievable, and most of these are Texas-centric cases, folks. So buckle up. The next lawyer behaving badly is Eric Williams, who was a former justice of the peace in Kaufman County. He was a JPN lawyer who went on a killing spree, and this was only a few years ago. This was 3 or 4 years ago. He murdered the DA and his wife, plus an assistant DA, in retaliation for a theft conviction and a disbarment. I mean, it's just, again, this guy's a lawyer, and pulled this. The next is Judge Walter Smith, who I know well. Judge Smith presided, I think he just passed away, but he presided over the Branch Davidian trial. Was very pro-prosecution at the beginning of it. By the end, he came around our way a little bit, but he was sanctioned in 2015 for sexually harassing a courthouse employee. He retired and kept his annual salary. To me, if I'm an American and I understand that a judge abused his power so much that he had to retire for sexually harassing a courthouse employee, I don't want my tax money going to pay for his lifetime salary. But he did. The next one, again, Texas-centric, right down the road, is Judge Sam Kent. Again, I knew Judge Kent. I didn't know him well. He was always fair and reasonable to me. I kind of liked him. He was a no bullshit guy, but one more time, a man with black robe disease, meaning he let his his position get in the way of his judgment. He resigned in 2009 following charges of sexual abuse, and then in May he was sentenced to 33 months in prison for lying to investigators about sexually abusing 2 female employees. Next one, and she's not at this level in terms of I point out Kathy Rumler today only because it's timely. She was one of the lead prosecutors in Sheila Kahanik's case, the Enron trial, which I was fortunate to get an acquittal in, and I always got along with Kathy. She never, as far as I could tell, never lied, cheated, stole. If somebody would have told me 20 years ago that she would become general counsel to Goldman Sachs, I might have been a little surprised. But now she's experiencing a bunch of fire because she maintained after she left the U.S. Attorney's Office, she was White House counsel to Barack Obama, then became a partner at Latham, and is now chief legal counsel and chief legal officer and general counsel for Goldman Sachs. But all the emails between she and Jeffrey Epstein, which was clearly after Epstein was convicted in the Florida incident, is coming to light, and she's catching flack. But I mean, we can't act as lawyers like that, or have those among us in our profession act like that and not expect consequences.
Yeah, Dan, I mean, it's always like interesting to see the people who are, practicing law and supposed to be the ones guarding the rules, and when they break it, the credibility gets broken pretty fast, and it's hard to earn that back. You've mentioned that before. It's like once you break people's trust, earning it back in this profession is really difficult. So can you explain, to our audience of, from your perspective again, how do we get better? Like, where do we go from here?
Yeah, and I think it's hard. And let me tell you, I have violated every one of these 5 things I'm going to advocate for at one point or another, because, I make mistakes. But, thing number 1 is to communicate proactively, meaning tell your client early, often, and late, the good, the bad, and the ugly. As a lawyer or as a human, not necessarily as a lawyer, but as a human, I'm a people pleaser. I don't like to deliver bad news, right? I just don't. And sometimes there's a hesitation when we get an offer from a prosecutor that we know that a client's not going to like, where we just say, it's Friday, let's not upset his weekend. Let's roll into Monday. The truth is, it'll make our weekend better, right? And Anthony's gone through that. He's experienced that as a young lawyer. So talk to us about that, and I'll
Sure. Yeah. So, like I said, people come to us at their typically for a solution to the worst problem in their life. And the reality is, we don't make the facts and we don't make the evidence. And sometimes the facts are bad and the evidence is bad. And in certain cases, no amount of lawyering is going to change what the state offers a defendant, and they're going to have to go to trial. So when you find out for the first time that your client has a prison offer that's pretty substantial, you've got to turn around and make a phone call. Ethically, you are obligated to relay that offer to your client. And so Dan and I have to make calls oftentimes to people and explaining to them that the current offer on the table includes a lot of prison time. And it's not a delicate, you have to be delicate about how you relay that information, and they're typically not happy to hear it. But it's important to get that information out up front and not sit on it, because if you do and you act like everything's great and dandy and sunshines and roses, then when at some point you're going to have to turn around and face reality. And it's better to have been up front from the start than to wait until that point to deliver that kind of information.
Mentally, how, as a younger lawyer, how do you mentally prepare yourself to tell one of your clients that they're about to face hard prison time?
Well, so luckily I've had some time on the prosecution side, and I dealt with significant cases that resulted in significant prison time, and I've been to a prison. So I try
as a visitor, not an inmate. Let's get that
as
out
a visitor,
there.
yeah. So I try to approach it. I think if you haven't, and you treat this like numbers are numbers and whatever, and it's not your life, and you don't take to heart what's happening to your client, then it's really easy to just not come off as understanding and sincere. So I try to approach it very seriously, and I try to walk them through sort of what the offer is, why the offer is what it is, and what we can do next, right? What is our strategy? And give them time to think about what I said, and then and I learned that from Dan. Don't have one conversation about it. Sometimes you've got to break it up into multiple conversations, and listen to what they have to say.
Mike McCool, we interviewed this past weekend, and Mike said a number of fascinating things, but apropos to this, in terms of communicating proactively, he was saying that if you have bad news, just tell them the bad news. Mm-hmm. Don't quantify it. Don't qualify it. Don't explain it. Just get the worst part out first, and then say, I know this is not what you wanted to hear, or we'll see if we can make the argument or the offer better. But if you're a young lawyer and you're struggling to have that conversation, I think it applies not only to the legal professions, but to interpersonal relationships or whatever. If you're going to get a divorce, don't go home and say, honey, we've had a lot of good years, and I really appreciate, what you've done for me. And I don't want to do this because I know it's good. But just go home and say, I want a divorce, and then go into the rest. And I don't, Robin, I'm just saying, I'm just using this as an example. But if you get the negative part out first, it's easier than trying to work up the whatever to get to the negative part.
And your question too is, how do I prepare for it? And I think as a young lawyer, Dan has years of experience, and so he's going to have more credibility with a client. So as a young lawyer, you've got to know your case inside and out, and you've got to be prepared. So you need to be ready to field questions about the whys and the whats. And if you're not, and you go and deliver bad news, it's going to make your client, it's really going to affect their confidence in you as the person that's supposed to be representing them.
Yeah, the studies will show, and if you look at any bar journal, the number one reason for a grievance or a complaint against your lawyer is failure to communicate, right? And so that's why I've got it first, is communicate proactively. The second, in terms of how we get better, is being transparent about costs, right? And look, this applies across the board, but that's a hard thing for a client to accept. For example, most of the time when, again, our little centric world here, when a client comes to see us, we'll set a two-tier fee, one for a non-trial resolution and one for a resolution that includes a trial. What people hear is the retainer. Let's say the retainer is $100 and the trial fee is another $150. Even though it's in the contract, they'll walk away saying, well, I got to pay that $100, but I'm never going to have to pay that $250, right? That they hear what they want to hear and disregard the rest. And then you show, you're 6 weeks or 2 months out of trial and say, there's another $150 that you owe because there's a lot of work to be, I didn't understand that. I didn't agree to that. Well, yeah, you did, but it's probably on us to sit them down and say, you understand, even though it's in black and white, you understand that there's an additional trial fee. I think the third thing.
Dan, before you go to the third thing, what happens when a client doesn't pay that second half with the lawyer? Like, what is that process like? How does it go?
Well, therein lies the problem, right? So, and this is why people don't understand when we need to get the retainer up front, right? The initial retainer is, once the case is set for trial, or even the setting to get it set for trial, and they don't pay you, most judges aren't going to let you out of a trial. So you're stuck, right? And if you're in federal court, that is particularly true, right? If your client won't pay you, that's not the judge's problem. That's your problem. And that's hard for a client to understand because they don't want a trial. They're not planning on a trial. Nobody wants a trial, right? No one in their right mind wants a trial. But trials are very expensive things. And but the answer to your question is, that's how a lawyer can really get stuck and be in trial over something that he didn't get paid for. And that's especially problematic if it's a long trial, or even worse, a long trial out of town or out of state. It can be devastating to a lawyer financially. Conversely, in civil court, it is routine if you don't get paid that a judge will let you out. Again, the experience or the fallout for the criminal lawyer is arguably worse than it would for the civil lawyer. But once again, we value money more than liberty, and civil lawyers can withdraw based upon oftentimes a motion to withdraw because they haven't been paid, and in criminal cases you can't.
That's very interesting. Okay, now you can move to number 3.
Thank you. So the third thing, and again, to harken back to what Mike said the other day, McCool at his ranch, the case isn't about you, right? The case is about the client. And I've seen lawyers get up, in my view, and make fools out of themselves in opening statement talking about what their dad did or what their mom did or whatever. Maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think a jury gives a rat's fucking ass what my mom did or what my dad did. I can't imagine that they care. But more importantly, it's not about the lawyer. That would be like me telling a jury in opening statement, this is a very important case to me and my parents. Well, no, it's not about me. It's about the client. And the more that we understand it's about the client and not the lawyer, the better off I think our client is going to be, because we are certainly a vehicle. We are representative of the client, and we are the spokesman and lawyer for the client. But I want my jury to care about what happens to my client, right? They're probably not going to ever really care about me. The art of the deal is not getting them to care about me. The art of the deal is to getting them to care about my client. That's what's going to get the right result is, well, Cogdell may not be able to buy a new Lamborghini this year if we don't vote his way. I mean, I don't ever want that thought to be enter into a juror's mind. I want them to care about the client.
Does that close off our list?
No, Anthony's going to talk to us about what the fourth way we can get better, and the fifth way.
Do you think that age can be a limitation for a lawyer? Like if you're a young lawyer, you don't have as much trial time, and do you think a client will look at you and be like, shit, I wish I had someone who is a little bit more, rugged and has that experience? You think that plays a factor for young lawyers?
Absolutely. I mean, you the last thing you want to do as a young lawyer is get out of your skis. And so if you are fresh to being a defense attorney and you take a really small retainer in an effort to get a really big boy case, like a big murder case or a federal fraud case that you don't know how to deal with adequately, then that's a great example of how you're going to get in hot water down the road.
The dichotomy that you get into as a lawyer, and I've dealt with this, is, look, I'm 69 years old. I have made a number of mistakes in my practice, none intentionally, but I make mistakes. I'm human, and I've always believed if I did make a mistake, I should acknowledge that mistake in whatever language that is appropriate, because that's the right thing to do. But the dichotomy is sometimes I've done that and say, okay, maybe I should have argued, we lost a case. Well, you should have done this and you should have done that. You should have done it the other way, right? Monday morning quarterback, everybody's got an opinion. But if you do and say, you know what, you're right, I should have argued that. Then next thing you're going to be facing a 2255 or writ challenging your ineffective assistance of counsel argument, where well, he admitted to me that he made a mistake, right? So I don't think that should ever get in the way of you being truthful and honest with the client. But you have to recognize as a lawyer that if you do acknowledge a mistake, that even acknowledging it can have consequences beyond more than having a mistake. But I think the most important thing in terms of how we get better is just to shut the fuck up and do good work, right? We can talk all we want about communicating and transparency and caring and all that, but at the end of the day, it's our effort and it's our results that are gonna get our clients through this. So, because we've talked about a bunch of bad lawyers, I feel it only appropriate to balance that out. And we talked about a couple episodes ago, Aaron, the what do you call it? The
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore of criminal defense lawyers, and all that's true. But look, criminal defense lawyers are great, but some of these heroes here, I mean, they are like generational. So the first one is Thurgood Marshall. And I don't think any lawyer or frankly any human can not acknowledge what a wonderful change in our history Thurgood Justice Marshall made. I mean, he was lead counsel for the NAACP. He argued Brown versus Board of Education, ending segregations in public schools. I mean, Lyndon Johnson appointed him. I think he was the first black appointed to the Supreme Court. I'm not positive. But Thurgood Marshall, if there's a Mount Rushmore of any lawyers, he's on it. Second is Brian Stevenson. He's far less known than some of these other folks, but he founded the Equal Justice Initiative. And get the math on this. He won relief for over 140 people that were wrongfully convicted prisoners on death row. 140 people.
It's crazy.
You can talk about Racehorse Haynes winning 163 DWIs, or me winning this, or Rusty winning that, or whatever. That guy, and 95% of lawyers don't even know who he is. But that stat alone, getting relief for 140 wrongfully convicted prisoners on death row, is just remarkable. RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was a goat for sure. She litigated cases that eliminated gender discrimination. She fundamentally changed how the Constitution protects equal rights regardless of sex. She was, I think, the second woman appointed to the Supreme Court by President Clinton. And I'm not trying to make this about gender, but she has inspired so many women in so many different areas of life. She was just a phenomenal woman.
Before we move to the next one, I have a pretty interesting, curious question about RBG. There's a lot of people who are upset that she didn't give her seat up during, I think it was Biden administration. When did she die exactly? I think
she didn't give it up during Trump, right?
Yeah. So Donald Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court just days later. Correct. So I'm getting the dates wrong. So it was before she was sick, before Trump's 2016 to 2020 first administration, there was a camp that wanted during Obama's administration for her to step down, knowing that she was later in age. So my question is kind of based behind the idea that these Supreme Court justices, they kind of keep their seat, forever. And what your just opinion is on that altogether?
I'm not sure, frankly, what my opinion is. She was such a force and such a a commanding figure on the court, albeit a lot of times through dissents rather than majorities. I can see how she would want to stay. I can see how she would not want to politicize her departure by doing it timely. I get the integrity of that position. So I understand people, that think she should have, so Trump couldn't have yet another woman on the Supreme Court, which he did. Yeah. Or another person. So here we are. But I mean, she is such an icon and was such an amazing justice that I ain't going to criticize her.
Of course. And what we can have a more deeper dive onto the Supreme Court altogether and how they get appointed and what that means and just your 2 cents on that. But we can save that for another episode. We'll get through the next. The
next two kind of crack me up.
This is good
because look, when you hear Mahatma Gandhi, the first thing, maybe the last thing you think of, but certainly not the first, is he was a lawyer, right? Who knew? But Gandhi was trained as a barrister in London. He fought racial discrimination in South Africa. He was a wonderful ethicist. He helped India break away from Great Britain. But again, it's almost ironic that one of the most revered figures in my generation was a lawyer, because you just don't associate Gandhi with being a lawyer.
That's awesome.
And likewise with Nelson Mandela. Yeah, again, lawyer is not the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Nelson, but he practiced law defending black South Africans in apartheid courts, and After his release from prison, he negotiated the peaceful transition to democracy and became South Africa's first black president. But again, I'm putting some good folks up there as opposed to the bad ones. I guess we do have one more.
Yep.
Morris Dees. I've actually met Morris Dees. He founded the Southern Poverty Law Center. Wonderful man, amazing career. But he was a civil litigator who used his skills to bankrupt organizations like the Ku Klux Klan and others. So, with that 5 or 6 fellows, I'm not sure it does anything more than point out that we got good lawyers out there and we got bad lawyers out there.
That's awesome. Do you know, Teaser Pony, did you know that Gandhi was a lawyer?
I did not know that Gandhi was a lawyer. So, we learn every podcast.
You learn. This is the point. We learn here, and that clip is going to be fun to put together. And, this is a good session, Dan. We appreciate you preparing some of this and sharing your insight. For the tail end of this, we'll just have a little bit of fun, kind of throw some things on to react to, both you and Teaser Pony. I want to start with a clip here. So in pop culture recently, obviously, Kim Kardashian's always all over social media and is just a titan in her own industry for many reasons. But more recently, she actually, she's been pursuing the practice of law. Her father was infamously a big time lawyer for OJ, and she wants to follow his footsteps and create her own path. But she actually, unfortunately, she didn't pass the bar. So there's a video of her kind of reacting to that, and I want to play it for you guys to react to as well because I thought it was pretty funny.
That all of the psychics that we have met with and that we're obsessed with are all full of shit. They all collectively, maybe 4 of them, have told me it was going to pass the bar. So they're all full pathological liars. Don't believe anything they say.
So in this clip, she explains how she went to a few different psychics to see if she would pass the bar. And unfortunately, the psychics all told her that she would, and she didn't. And there's other clips as well of her just reacting to not passing the bar, kind of crying and just upset. And what are your just initial thoughts when you see that?
I'm not sure I'd be blaming the psychics. I do, and I'm not a huge Kim Kardashian fan, whatever. But look, the California bar is a notoriously difficult bar, and I admire her. It's not like she needed the money, so I admire her for trying. And I know people that are good lawyers that took the bar 2, 3, and 4 times here. So I'm not going to throw a stone at her for not passing a very difficult bar. I just think that maybe her anger at the psychics is a little displaced. Anthony, what's your take?
I mean, she's clearly a bright woman because look at the amount of success she's attained.
Ooh, a little Freudian slip there. Look
Took
at
me a
it.
second
Where
to
are we
catch
going
up.
with this line?
Took me just
Look at
a
the
second
amount
to catch up.
Look at the amount of sex this girl's gotten.
But
Sucks.
if shit hits the fan and I'm searching for lawyers and this clip pops up, I'm certainly not following it to her website to hire her. So I get that the California bar is difficult. I think this is satire, and I think it's just to get
I think
attention.
everything she does is for attention, but she has been pursuing this, and I don't think it's the first time that she failed it. But Dan, where have you taken the bar? Where have you passed the bar? Just Texas, or have you?
I passed it the first time.
You passed it.
And my psychics told me I would, so apparently I have better psychics than Kim Kardashian. No, the only state that I've ever taken the bar in is Texas. I have been admitted in what's called pro hoc vice, a case-by-case basis in like 16 other states. But generally speaking, if you are in good standing with your home state and you want to apply to handle a case in another jurisdiction, you have to file an application for pro hoc vice, which means, hey, judge, I just want to practice in this one case in your district. You have to show them a letter of good standing from the state bar that you don't have any sanctions, that you don't have any grievances pending, and most judges will let you in. So that's not unusual. I probably try more cases out of state than most other criminal defense lawyers I know, but that's for a variety of reasons, not all of which are throwing my arm out of socket, patting myself on the back reasons. But the only state bar I've ever taken is the Texas bar. Just fun fact, when Dirt was young and I was a baby lawyer, or not yet a baby lawyer, I was clerking at the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin, And in those days, we're talking about 1982, so it's been a minute. But the only two people that got the master list of who passed the bar was the presiding judge at the Court of Criminal Appeals and the chief judge on the Texas Supreme Court. So I happened to be working for, when my bar results came out, for the presiding judge on the Court of Criminal Appeals, Judge John F. Onion Jr. So everybody knew that I had the list, right? So I had buddy after buddy blowing my phone up. You couldn't, Al Gore hadn't invented the internet. So I had friend after friend calling me up saying, hey, did I pass? Did I pass? And several times I had to explain to my friends, no, you didn't pass. And like, Cogdell, quit, don't screw me over, man. Don't screw me over. I'm like, you didn't pass. No, quit fucking, you didn't pass. And that was not fun news to deliver.
Damn. TJ Pony, tell me about your experience taking the bar and finding out that you passed and just the whole shebang.
I treated it like a job preparing for it, which I think you have to do, right? Because it's the most important test. And the way I viewed it was that if I don't pass it, then I'm not going to have a job and I'm not going to have income. So I went to Austin and took the bar. I took the December bar as opposed to the July bar because I graduated law school early. And then after I passed, it was like $100 a week for me to rent an apartment room in Mexico. So I was on the beach in Manzanillo when I found out about passing the bar. No one there knew what I was talking about, so I had my own celebration, and that's when I came back and got to work. So tequila shots.
And recently, as recent as today, Dan, I learned that there's like a ranking system for the bar. So can you explain how that works? And do you put weight into where somebody ranks for how high they score in terms of if you want to hire them?
I know that some people keep up with where they ranked. I think I was, middle of the pack at best. I don't give a shit where you rank passing the bar. I mean, if you top the bar and you're first or second, okay, great.
Words of encouragement for people who maybe don't pass their first time. Do you feel like, is it for Teaser Pony? Anything?
Yeah, I had a good friend that had to take it a few times, and we studied together for a lot of exams, and we studied, so when she didn't pass, I was one of her calls, and I was supportive and told her to get back on the horse. That's all you can do. You donated so much money. You donated so much time to becoming a lawyer. If you really want to do it, go do it. And we talk about accepting and looking back on your mistakes. Look at what you did wrong. Where were you deficient when you took the test? Did you treat it like a job? Was it the main focus in your life? And just make the tweaks and go get it done. It's in the grand scheme of your career. As a younger lawyer, I hope to have a career, not to make any digs, but long like Dan's, right? And so 6 more months of bar prep is really nothing in the grand scheme of which career lies ahead of you.
Long like Dan, huh? That's how we like to, it's probably one of my favorite sayings.
I don't think I said that. I think I said long like Dan's.
Yeah, long like Dan.
Let's move on.
Dan, I threw this up here. I want to kind of
Just to piss me off.
Talk a little bit about just a recent tweet, because Greg Abbott tweeted this yesterday. Is this fair game to talk about? Or?
Sure.
Okay. So Greg tweeted yesterday the Epic City development scheme would have forced homeowners to pay non-refundable fees straight to the mosque and restricted owners' ability to sell their homes in order to maintain an Islamic enclave. Texas outlawed the fraudulent and discriminatory scheme and ended the Epic development. No matter how they change their name, Muslim-only enclaves are illegal in Texas. What are your thoughts about this tweet?
Well, just one more visual demonstration of Greg Abbott not knowing what he's talking about. First off, it wasn't a scheme, and there was nothing that forced homeowners to pay the fees to a mosque. That's a lie. There was nothing that restricted the owner's ability to sell their homes in order to maintain, the development. That's a lie. Texas, he says that Texas outlawed that fraudulent and discriminatory scheme and ended the Epic development. No, he didn't. They're still working on it. I mean, I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It's just greatly disappointing that our governor continues to spew misinformation, false information, and lies about that development. It just, he's pandering to the alt-right, as are others, as are people that at least one that really disappoints me, but we'll save that for a private conversation between he and I. You ought not run for election or re-election based upon a fucking lie, and it needs to stop. And I've sat back and watched it for almost a year now, and I'm sick of it. And if other Texans want to tolerate elected officials who are running for re-election based upon lies, that's on you. I'm not going to tolerate it anymore. I can vote for whoever the fuck I want, and it ain't going to be you.
Yeah, no, that was powerful. And Dan, it's been, this whole Epic thing is what brought us to you, right? Like we saw that you were representing the community and trying to help see that project through. Epic's not a community that Tommy and I are involved with in any way. We're not really we're familiar with it, but a little bit from a distance. But it's interesting, man. Like since we started working with you and we've started putting this content out and you've kind of shared your stories, we get a lot of DMs, of hate towards Muslims and towards Islam. And like when Tommy and I open them and read them, it's an interesting experience for us because we're like, wow, people really they paint these like broad strokes about Muslims. There are about 30,000 Muslims in Dallas.
There are about 300,000 Muslims in Dallas, not 30,000.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so in North Dallas, just in North Dallas alone, but 300,000 total.
Yeah.
7,000 in Epic Mosque,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe this number's off, but I have it up here. Total Muslims in Dallas
No.
is about 30,000.
It's way more than that.
It's a small percentage. What the number is overall small percentage, but the main point I'm getting at is that just like any other culture, just like any other religion, there's a spectrum of people, good and bad, and we are not all on this same page together, calculated and strategic to try to take over. A lot of these messages from these, grandmas in Waxahachie or whatever that you would say, they're messaging you saying like, oh, you must not know about how bad they are and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to plan. But since in this past year working on this and just getting exposed to this type of like, hey, like what are your thoughts about just what you've learned about the community and how do those comments and DMs impact you when you see them?
Well, look, what Abbott is doing is the same thing that other right-wing politicians are doing. They're pandering toward this white Christian nationalism bullshit, which basically means if you're not like us, you can't get on board. And this country is built upon immigrants, literally, figuratively, and actually, and the idea that based upon a Trumpian iteration or whatever we want to call it, that this white Christian nationalist viewpoint is the popular one to be is sad. It's disrespectful to our heritage. It's disrespectful to whites. It's disrespectful to non-whites. It's disrespectful to the idea of being a melting pot, which we are. But in terms of working with the folks at Epic, those are the nicest client base I've ever had in my life. They're respectful, they're peaceful, they're family oriented, they're hardworking, they're educated, they're intelligent. They want to do nothing but follow the law and live peacefully. And we have these ass clowns that want to mischaracterize things. It's shameful what they've done. It's shameful what they continue to do.